Welcome to the Digication Scholars Conversation Series. I'm your host, Jeff Yan. In this episode, you will hear part 2 of my conversation with Laurie Pierce from DePaul University. More links and information about today's conversation can be found on Digication's Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Full episodes of the Digication Scholar Conversation Series can be found on YouTube or your favorite podcast app.
You are about to hear part 2 of our conversation with Laurie Pierce from DePaul University. Please be sure to listen to our previous episode to hear part 1 of this conversation.
I think that goes really, it's a really interesting set of balance that you're talking about, because I, as I was sort of going back to this whole, students being, they really are able to get the drive from just pure passion and sort of a mission-based thing. How many students today are talking about, maybe going into engineering, but because they wanted to solve climate crisis. So to me, it almost didn't matter whether it's a liberal arts major or what have you, but it's almost come from a slightly different part of your heart that says, it wasn't just for a job, it wasn't just for, maximizing my potentials.
Right.
It was almost for like, hey, I've got a thing that I've got going here. I need to make myself useful in this way. That's how I'm going to feel, good about myself.
Yeah.
And I think that maybe, I don't know, maybe in the past 10, 20 years, kids have been maybe given a little bit more space to think about those things too, because some of these issues have come up and because I feel like when I was a kid, many of those things also just don't get talked about nearly enough.
Right.
It's just kind of like, yeah, environment, we have issues, but there's always a but, you're not going to be the one who solves this. Don't worry about it.
Right.
Right. And today is really different. I mean, think about the marches that is started by, Greta, on climate change, right? And that's fascinating to me. And in fact, I think that some of the things that we started looking at is sort of the psychology behind learners and their desire to be seen, be heard, be recognized, and that, if anything, sort of even brings about some ideas that we have about how people are dealing with online learning and COVID today.
Right.
We clearly have the ability to do video and audio chats and submit files and all that stuff. But I wonder whether the models that you have going there have a little bit more of that. Well, the students are being seen, being heard. Like you said, they have to figure out how to express themselves. They have to find their ideas, ask the questions.
Yeah.
And they want people to know about it and to be recognized.
Yeah.
Like that aspect of learning to me is not only fascinating, but it feels almost like it's one of the core parts of what pedagogy needs to focus on in order to continue to get their attention and their engagement.
Yeah. It's again, they're getting pushed in so many different directions. So at DePaul, there's the kids who come from, the business school or the, digital media. I always thought the digital media people would be more creative than they actually are. But they get kind of in their box of doing something in a specific way. And I remember asking a digital media student once, I think it was like video games. And I thought, I mean, I didn't know anything about it. I don't know what they do. I've never played a video game in my life. That Mario one, I think I played once, but I didn't like it. But I remember asking, it was like, oh, you're doing, you're going to be making stories. Have you taken any English classes? It's just like, no, why would I do that? It's like, because you're telling stories. Those are stories, right? Don't you have to have some kind of interaction between, a fairy tale? I don't know what a video game story is, but I'm assuming that those two things go together, but apparently not. It's like, well, okay. Okay. So they're working up against such diverse forces. So, and all our students have to take courses in the liberal studies, but sometimes they're just resisting. It's like, I just got to get this class done. I got 10 weeks and I got to get out of here. So, if somebody isn't interested in what you're doing, or you're not inspiring any creativity in them, it's like, well, okay, there's only so much I can do. You at least need to be able to proofread your paper, and then you can move on to the next part of your life. But it's hard. I mean, they come from such different places with such different experiences that not everybody is going to be, ready to do this. So, but that's okay. Maybe
I
some
think
later.
you're right. And maybe some people, just the natural instinct isn't to do all these very uncertain, um,
Hmm.
like nebulous tasks
Yeah.
where they just trust the process and something good will come. They
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
only would do it if you're showing me exactly I'm not going
Yeah.
to fall and hurt myself,
Yeah.
right?
And
And
that's a
I
different
get
mindset. I have to remember that not everybody is comfortable, just kind of floating around, that some people really need the
that.
structure, either cognitively or just that's where their creativity comes from. It's within that structure. So me, not so much, but so you have to kind of make it so that it's possible for everybody to do
Yeah,
that.
yeah. I think that as I was, that reminded me when you were talking about the digital media, majors.
Edit
Um,
that out. I don't want them to think.
no, no. I and I was actually thinking about the contrast with Jack,
Hmm.
because Jack went on to become, I think he's like a digital media director for
Oh
the
yeah.
Illinois Senate.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah. So he's
Wow,
doing there. Yeah.
wow.
I mean, Jack took it. He knew where he was going. So he's one of those people who's just, he kind of plows right through. He knew exactly what he wanted to do, where he wanted to be. But he got interested. He was in political science, but I think, kind of getting to explore this question of Black prosecutors took him in a slightly different direction. He kind of knew that's what he was, he knew that was something important. But I felt like somewhere along the line, he kind of stopped and looked back and saw that as something more important than what he intended it to be. So, his project ended up focusing more on, I think he was working for Kim Fox at the time on her campaign,
Yeah,
or,
I think that he said that he was at least volunteering and doing some
yeah.
aspects of some stuff for Kim. And I mean, it's amazing for me to see students being such uh, involved activists, while they're at school and
Mhm.
handling the school load, and plus doing this on the side. And
Yeah.
so good for him being able
Yeah.
to, pull this off. But and you can see, I mean, of course, that's why I mean, the portfolio was so powerful.
Hmm.
Because I mean, I read the whole thing, by the
Oh,
way.
good for I looked at
I,
him again today. It's like, oh my God, I have to read these again. I haven't read them in 2 years.
I read the whole thing because I was
Oh,
like, this
good.
is really good,
Oh my
and
God.
it makes sense. And I did, like you said before, I didn't read it all linear, in a linear fashion. Because I started somewhere first. I think I started with the Kim Fox.
Hmm.
Um, she has a whole section on Kim Fox. But after
Right.
I read that, I'm like, well, I'm gonna read this other stuff
Yeah.
because it was it was really quite good.
Yeah.
Um,
And you can stop there, right? You don't all if nothing else interests you, you just move on. If it's just, or you find a link that he said and you can go someplace else, which is, and it's not, it doesn't mean the rest of it isn't good. It's just the rest of it wasn't useful for one particular person. So, and that's important in reaching out for an audience, right? You don't sit down and read the entire New York Times. It's like, I don't care about the sports section. So you find the place where you need to
oh,
go,
the video
and
game section.
or the video game section. God help me. They're in the sports section now. There's a whole
I know,
thing. It's like,
the esports
wow,
stuff, yeah. That I don't get either.
I
My
don't get it either.
children are, I don't wanna say they're really way into it, but they're into it way more than I am, or
If
I
they
have.
understand it, then they're into it. So,
Yeah. And I do think though, you were just talking about, like, just read this part and not others. I think that is such a liberating thing, both for the authors and for the consumers or the readers
mhm.
of media today. Um, in a, I guess in an interesting way, musicians had to do that too, right? You used to
Right.
design your entire album's experience, and there's
Right.
something magical about that. I won't
Yeah, yeah,
lie,
yeah.
I love that myself.
Mhm.
Um, listening to someone's album beginning to end, and that's how it's designed to be.
Right.
And even with the art and the the lyrics and everything.
Yeah, yeah.
But then today, that's not what people do. And I
Mhm.
think that there is something really interesting going back to that original, like 15-page paper. Like, honestly, aside from people that are reading manuscripts today and reading really truly academic papers today, no one that I know go and look at 8.5 by 11 printed stuff
Yeah.
that is double spaced. It's a terrible format to consume, actually.
It is not very interesting. Even if you put pictures in it, it's
Yeah,
still not very interesting. It's that dimension of it. You just can't go anywhere. And I've spent my entire life reading 8.5 by 11 pictures. But
yeah,
it's like, you have to bring your imagination to it. If you don't know the subject that you're reading about, there is
yeah,
no reason to go past the first 5 pages because there's no way to engage it. But if you go to the site and you read one section, it's like, oh, I see
yeah,
why all of these things might go together. Or I only need this pieces. I'm going to bookmark this and come back to this later. I might need this. To me, it's like, why would you? I'm I'm an old fogey about some things, right? It's like we have to do it this way. But it seems crazy to me that we're still asking students to, do that kind of work only without any, you need that structure for, certain kinds of work. You have to learn how to do that. But once you've got the basic idea, then, you don't have to keep writing the 5 paragraph essay. As a matter of fact, don't keep writing the 5 paragraph essay because that's a strategy, that's a form that locks you into a particular way of thinking. And there's no creativity to that. There's no, and it's, if it's boring to you, it's boring to your reader. So it's,
well, like you were saying about the skills that you get students to learn, that's those are the skills. The skills isn't to how to write a 5 paragraph always the same essay. And like people, in I mean, I think about, I mean, I used to do some teaching, um and so there's, I guess, some aspects of academic work that I enjoy and liked. But of course, I was in an art and design school, so we
right.
didn't do a lot of this kind of writing anyway,
Yeah.
because that work is much more visual. But I do, enjoy reading about other people's stuff sometimes, so if it's like truly sort of related to what I'm doing, right? But as I, sort of when I left, sort of teaching and being always around just, the professors,
Mhm.
no one else does this. We are the only ones,
Yeah.
and 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 not being able to communicate the way that everyone else is communicating
Mhm.
actually is a problem for our students. That's how I look at it.
Yeah, yeah. We have a friend of mine and I keep a blog, totally off subject, but we keep a blog about a set of primary sources we've been working with about Hawaii during the territorial period. So we
Oh
have
wow,
all of these sources and we've been kind of going through them. And they're all, student papers of all things, but there are these, students at the University of Hawaii who are writing about their lives in Hawaii between 1920 and, 1959. This is like, nobody has this. This is an incredible set of primary sources. And so we're trying to figure out how come everybody doesn't know about this? We're singing and dancing. It's like, look, we have all of this stuff. So we finally started a blog so that, at least we had a place to put this stuff. And we couldn't just lay it there. We had to do something with it. So we've been writing over the last several years, taking a document or set of documents and writing short essays about them, and then finding, and they really are kind of, analytical essays, but the audience it reaches is completely outside of academics. Academics do not care about what we're writing about. No scholar has ever looked at this and thought, this is good. People from the community, it's like, I grew up in, Paella, and you have a paper about Paella, and I really wanted to, or, I saw this map, and then I went to, and, World War II people generation are, getting in touch with us and saying, I've always wanted, I've never saw this picture. There's my grandfather, that, all kinds of stuff like that. That's where people are, landing with this stuff. They don't care about the, decolonialism. They don't care about that stuff. They care about, that's a picture of the street I grew up on. So, and to me, that's as worthy a set of scholarly ideas as anything else, that you found a way to bring other people into a set of research, and they can do whatever they want with it. They can just look at the pictures, they can read the essay, they can look at the other things on the site. So if it's, I get in trouble for not writing enough 8.5 by 11 pieces of paper with like, I'm not very I'm a bad scholar because I don't like to do that. I don't find it very interesting, but you got to do it sometimes.
Well, maybe that's, I don't know. I feel like that something's going to change at some point. We can't, like, I can't imagine that. I don't know. Let's give some time. Maybe the time is long. Maybe it's 10 years, 20 years. But at some point, it's got to change. We have to, at some point, realize that some other format, some kind of other medium, or a combination of different models of, consuming and authoring
Yeah.
provides provides uh, opportunity this you just don't get otherwise, and
Yeah.
that the rest of the world is doing it. And so if
Yeah.
you keep wanting to communicate in a very this one language that no one speaks, then you are cut off from the rest of the world.
Yeah. And the tricky
That's
part
the
is making sure that those things don't disappear just because, I mean, the academic, there's a reason for that stuff to exist as well. But, if we keep thinking, well, nobody's reading that, so we should only do this, it's like, no, 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 no. We need to be doing both of these things at the same time. There's no way not to have both of those things together. You don't have Black Lives Matter if you don't have, Kimberly Crenshaw 25 years ago saying intersectionality, right? That's where all of that stuff comes from. That stuff trickles down outside of the academy, and then people in the streets are making it alive. They're making it, they're talking about it and they're living it in a way that, it's not on the page, but once you get it off the page and into people's lives, it makes a huge difference. So there's some kind of, it is all, I'm a historian. So it's like, no, 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 don't overcorrect. We go this way and then we go that way. I'm always, after a while you start to see it's like, oh, going too far in that direction too. So, but that's the point of history. We're going to get it wrong more than we're going to get it right.
I that reminds me so much of a conversation I had when I was a student in architecture school.
Hmm.
And my professors at the time would ban us from using any computers to draft anything. So we can only use pencils, and on a
Wow.
drafting paper,
Yeah.
pencil or ink on a old drafting table with, the slanted table,
Right,
giant
right, right.
desktop with a parallel rule that you can move around, and tons of like angles and stuff. And and I was fascinated by the computers, and so I learned how to do it
Mhm.
secretly, because there was literally no one cared about it. So I learned about secretly in the lab, in the basement, because that's where the lab would be, in the basement.
Yeah,
Because no
yeah.
one, like, literally there was the wood shop, and then there was a computer lab, and it was like the worst space, like no light, So fine, so I learned how to do that, and I remember that I had done the work anyway. Kind of, I was a little bit more rebellious.
Mhm.
Teacher said no, I said yes, and I
Yeah.
went and did it. And my professor said you cannot submit this work, and so I remember I had to um, use. We had these mylar, like it's like tracing paper almost. I
Right.
traced over the computer drawings to hand it in.
I think
What
that's
a
cheating.
joke! Oh, it's totally cheating, but it's totally like a, "Oh, come on," like. And of course, what's so interesting is that, my the same professors several years later, um, after, they were done with me, way done with me, they they all ended up doing their own digital
Yeah,
versions of their work. It just
yeah.
took them longer to get there,
Mhm. Mhm.
because they were right in that. there was so much to learn about drawing with a pencil as well,
Right.
and it is a lost art actually today.
Mhm.
Like no architecture school students don't do this anymore, or they're
Right,
not
right.
good at doing that anymore. But they're also really good at doing some other kinds of thinking in on a
Yeah.
computer or on a tablet. So I don't feel like that, you're right in that it swings like a pendulum, but the medium just will always evolve, and as humans we kind of have to go with it in a way.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah,
Otherwise
yeah.
you get cut off by with the rest of the world, and then none of your work matters.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah, yeah.
so but that is, that's just jogs some really interesting memory. It definitely was a "I told you so" moment at some point. Um, I I um I feel like I can talk to you forever about all these things. And maybe we should, we should have more chats anyway,
Oh,
regardless
absolutely.
of the podcast. But I thought maybe for the purpose of this, we will, I want to wrap up by maybe asking you just a couple of final questions, or maybe just one final question for uh, what do you think about those who are perhaps, professors such as yourself? Maybe they are the ones who's listening to this and thinking, wow, I'm kind of inspired by this very free form. Let's go with the flow. Let's have the students ask the questions. You're willing to let go of the control and the power as the
Yeah.
professor. How and we know this, not every professor is going to want to do that, but for those who are inspired by this, they really are your tribe, but they've never been able to do it.
Mhm.
What would you say, like what would you be your advice? And let's end with that.
Um, Everybody's discipline is so different. So I'm always hesitant to say, yeah, absolutely do it this way. I think you have to find a way within whatever your structure is to be structureless somehow. One thing that, and it could be a little thing like one of the questions that was written down was, what's something your students have taught you? And I thought, I don't know. Then it occurred to me, I remembered, I was the first time I was teaching a class on mixed race identity. It was the first time I was teaching the class. And for some reason, I came into the classroom the first day, and the students had rearranged the room. I hadn't said anything to them. They had rearranged the room into a circle. It was, free form chairs and in rows, and they took everything and they arranged it in a circle. And I had no idea. I was like, what are you doing? It was a lot of students. I had this core group of students who were in women's and gender studies, and that's how they teach their classes, right? So unless it's a really big class, they come together as a cohort and they physically change the space. And the same things happen. You still have readings. You still have to do some of the same things. But to me, the difference between standing and sitting changed everything. I was shocked at how, first of all, how much easier it was. It was less stressful. I didn't have to, people weren't talking. I didn't feel like I have to kind of fill the space if they weren't talking. It's like, keep going. I'm just waiting, right? We were all there in a circle. We weren't peers. I'm still the person who, has got to keep control of the circumstance. And I'm still the person giving out the readings and I'm, in charge of some of that stuff. But just sitting there and letting them take over, letting them take control of the class. You do have to let go of the idea that there's some place to get to, right? If you have a structure, if you're teaching a class where everybody needs to know these three things by the end of the week, this is not a good idea. But if you have something, my subject matter is open enough. I have some things that I want us to get done, but for the most part, it's let's just get in here and see what happens. And they almost always come up with something better than what I would have done. Not better. Sometimes better, almost always different. They come up with, they write the prompts for me for their papers. I say, okay, we've been talking about this. What's the paper about? And they come up with ideas that were so much better than the ones, other than let's not write a paper. It's like, that's not an idea. So let's move on
Right.
from that. But they come up with different ideas, talking to each other, hearing each other. You don't hear each other if you're sitting in rows. doesn't, you can hear somebody's voice, but you're not communicating with somebody who's sitting behind you. So just that changing the space, sitting in a circle, sitting in a square, and everybody's sitting, and there's no head of the room. So I could sit anywhere in the room. I could be and still be a participant in the group. They're not expecting me to, I'm not standing up. I'm not the person who's performing. I'm not the only person who's performing. So everybody has to kind of play along, right? So you can't just sit there, because eventually I will say, so what do you think, Jack? And you have to play along. So sitting down, I would, it's a weird piece of advice. It's like, see what happens if you sit down with your class as opposed to standing up. Change the, kind of the architecture of the room, change the dynamic of the room by physically changing the space. And it may not work. Like I said, you have to be willing to let go of the control of the classroom, and sometimes it's gone. I just like, I'm not getting that control back. But like I said, they almost always come up with, if you trust them and they trust you, you almost always come up with something that is as interesting, usually more interesting. And it's certainly something that's more interesting to them, as opposed to me standing there and saying, these are the things that you're supposed to be interested in. Here are the ideas. Tell me where you want to go with these ideas. It's not for, I wouldn't tell everybody to do that. It's not a good piece of advice for everybody. The people who know how I teach think, yeah, right. But I don't know. The students seem to respond to it differently. And to me, I just enjoy it much more. If I don't have to stand in it, I never stand now. I sit down, and it completely changes the game. I like it much more than I used to. And I think it works better. I just think it's a more creative space for them when we are all working on it together.
I think that is beautiful. What a beautiful, almost like physical manifestation of a beautiful metaphor of a psychological sort of change in power, in balance. By tipping and playing with those factors, you create, you literally yank out the space and the time for them to do some of these explorations. I think it's beautiful. Well, I think with that, I think we should call today done. But I hope that we get to talk again soon.
Oh, absolutely, no problem.
Because this is fascinating, and I look forward to maybe touching base with Jack and Michaela again. I feel like we talked about them so much.
Yeah.
So we would have to do that, and I look forward to, in the future, if you have new batches of students doing things, and really following up on this idea that now that 2020 has happened, how your students sort of handling.
I'll let you know when we get to the end of the quarter. I'll let you know and send you the links to their projects, and you can take a look and see.
We'd love to see that. Yeah, maybe we can do another catch up then.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much, Laurie.
Oh, you're welcome.
You are what a pleasure, and I learned so much, and it's fascinating, and just like great to find someone who's in my tribe.
Oh, good. Me too. Thanks a lot. It was really great meeting you.
Okay. Well, same here. Take care.
Okay. Bye-bye.
The Digication Scholars Conversation Series is brought to you by Digication, a technology platform powering the most innovative e-portfolio programs in K-12 and higher education. Our website can be found at digication.com. This episode was produced by Drew Albanesius. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please like, subscribe, and share with a friend. Thanks for watching.